Again, welcome to Ask Jyoti Devi. I'm here to serve you. I hope that doesn't sound pretentious. I'm here in my capacity as a practicing professional astrologer, and those of you who know me know that it's my passion. Oops, I forgot to start broadcast thing, do the recording. Oh, no, I'm already doing that. Bear with me. Those of you that know me understand my vast degree of technical incompetence. So I apologize in advance for any technical glitches that occur here that I can't manage. But as I was saying, I'm here to serve you in my capacity as a professional practicing astrologer. And I realize that some of you here are interested in things other than being a professional practicing astrologer, but again, that's my original intent. So first, this is the labor of welcome. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Saturday to join me here, and I'm depending on you to ask questions. I have prepared material, but again, as I would do at the beginning of a consulting session, as I would state my intention, and my intention broadly is to serve you, but beyond that, it's to help you in an individual way as well. So, this is the labor of love from me to you. I support all of you listening, whomever you are. I support you. You have my best wishes for studying Jyotish. For whatever your use of Jyotish is. And so I would like to start, if it's all right with you, by asking you to, if you would either put in the chat box or the question box, would you let me know if you are currently practicing Jyotishi or if that is your intention? That'll kind of help to direct me. That'll sort of help direct me in terms of what I'm offering to you. So again, welcome everybody. Thank you, Vish. So, if those of us that are practicing Jyotishis, I have to say, this is not a job for sissies. We have to be really dedicated to the proposition of sometimes there's feast and famine as a professional practicing Jyotishi, but less so than previously. So I think that we're putting our own education into good use these days for people that come to us either as clients. Again, welcome everybody, as just asking innocent questions about. The question we get is, when will this end? Well, it might never end. Oops, I guess I shouldn't just blurt that out. I have sort of a candid consulting style, but again, one of my themes today is the value of adding hope to our clients. So yes, there's plenty of apparently hopeless situations in the world these days, but still, there's always something that can be emphasized in a person's chart that they can put their attention on that they can put their attention on. I think that my experience with my clients is that most clients know what their problems are. They already know what their problems are. If it were so easy to fix those problems, they would have probably already done so. But it's our job, I think, as Jyotishis, is to take a close look at these birth charts and tease out the very best areas where they can put more time and attention. And as you probably know, according to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, that where we put our attention, that area expands. So again, you might say, well, I already know that. And if we do already know that, then it bears repeating. That's my emphasis. I mean, just so you'll know. And it's not like we're being naive about the current difficulties of the situation, but still, one has a choice where one puts one's attention. I do make that point too. So I do want to mention too, in terms of the format of our conversation today, or soliloquy is for, do send me questions about anything at any time. And if I can veer off to ask a question or answer a question or address a question. This is what I say to my clients. I may not answer your question, but we're going to at least address it. So that's, but do send me questions if you like. Otherwise, along the lines of offering hope, is I think that when I see a client these days, as you may know, I use my main tool is transits, simple transits. I see 3 or 4 people every day. I have 90 minutes to speak to each one of them. And without going into too much detail about their dasha sequences, of course, I do address that at the beginning, because I mean, mainly for my information. But my clients come to me knowing nothing about astrology. They don't want to know about astrology. They don't want to know about astrology or Jyotish. They just want to know what I can, what kind of information can I can tell them about their current situation. And so that for me starts with, yes, I look at the background of dashas, but I don't get too involved in that. I do when I see a client, I'm not, when I hear myself say it's sort of appalling. Everybody knows I have 4 planets in Pisces, and I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about my function as a Jyotishi, just for the record. So the first order of business is, if I look at or when I look at their dashas, I've already emailed a client. Everything is done remotely now, obviously. We're speaking here in mid-October of 2020, and so everything is done either over Zoom or Skype or Google Meet or whatever their Microsoft Teams or whatever they have, whatever platform we're meeting on. It's such a wonderful world, we can do this now. So I've sent them a copy of their chart, and again, just for your information, I work in South Indian style. For me, that's easier, frankly. So anyway, I send them a copy of their chart, on which is a copy of their dasha sequences, and I refer to that as a calendar. I tell them, I mention to my client, you can see from this calendar that here's the cycle that you're in until whenever it is, 2026 or whatever. I give them the broad basis about that. This is the cycle of Mercury, and this is all about, continuing education, and Mercury is the lord of your 1st house or 9th house, and therefore there's a specific connotation for you. And then I set that aside. Then I go through my transit sequence. So in terms of the application for current times, for this where we are currently, I start, almost everybody is very interested to understand the effect of transiting Rahu Ketu. So we all know that Rahu Ketu changed signs or in the 3rd week in September. And again, I could say on September 22nd or 23rd, there's scholarly debate about how we're measuring the position of Rahu Ketu. But I say to my clients, and not in a casual way, but the 3rd week in September, did you perceive of whatever it was, whatever house Rahu Ketu are moving into? So as a general observation, I think we know that Rahu has just moved into Taurus, and Ketu has just moved into Scorpio. So the general theme, the generic theme for everybody is about finances, saving money, spending money, investing money, joint ventures with money, anything about money, assets, resources, movable assets. Now, I do make the point that we probably all know that Taurus, the natural, with its natural association to the 2nd house, is about movable assets. I make that distinction between fixed assets. So there's just that generic connotation, and defining the time frame well, where this will be more of an issue than it had been previously would be between the third week in September of 2020 and the third week in March of 2022. So I'm also, the point of me talking about this to you is to simply say that, that can start a discussion. Just for weeks now, I've been saying, well, a lot has changed since the last time I saw you. And here's what happened. Rahu Ketu have moved into these financial signs. They happen to be in these houses in your chart. Look for anomalies in that area. So I think that it's been mentioned before that in my practice, I try to make things as understandable as I can for my clients. And although Rahu Ketu can be a very interesting and mystifying and confusing topic, I think it's an interesting combination concept to consider the nodes of the moon as anomalies. Your clients will know what an anomaly is. Ramdas Bill Sinclair reminded me that he found value in my concept of Rahu Ketu being wild cards as well. So clients understand that sort of a thing. So I'm going to pause for a minute and read this question. Oh, well, that's a great one. So here's what I have. Here's the question from Vish. He says, how do you tease apart interpretations of a house when there are 3, 4, or 5 planets in that house? Yes, and that's well, I suppose, I don't know how common it is, but I see that regularly. Here's what I do with my clients. I tell them that this is a team sport. I'm quite lighthearted. I'm serious, but I'm lighthearted. So I would say to my client, well, this is a team sport. You're just going to have to listen while I offer all of these adjectives associated with this particular area. So, dear client, you have 4 planets in the same sign in your 5th house. So here's the generic meaning of the sun. The generic meaning, my emphasis, thing. What? Leadership, prominence. This is where you're operating from a position of strength. The sun means this in this house. Just sun means this generically in this house. Then for you, dear client, the sun is the lord of the fill in the blank house. Therefore, now we're adding the connotations of, if the sun is the lord of the 10th house, then this says that there's issues of your career, your name, your game, your fame, your status associated with this house. And so on. Now there turns out to be what my intention is to make in this case with 3 or 4 or 5 planets in the same house about the specific sentence. There may be 10 or 12 adjectives in this sentence saying that this is, well, interpretation. Now, what is Vish, I don't know what you mean. What's the point of the interpretation? Are we figuring this out for transits or for in their birth chart? If it's in their birth chart, I have to say that even if there are a lot of disparate influences, there will be disparate influences if somebody has 3 or 4 planets or 5 planets in the same place. But I find that no matter how many apparently oxymoronic combinations in a person's chart, that they will register. Here's a very important point too that I want to add, that I want to offer rather, is to have faith have faith in the essential meaning of any given planet. Have faith in that. Offer that with a confident voice. Or you could ask them, or it could be presented in terms of a question. I remember my last client had an odd situation. I said, it seems to me that you're quite cynical. This was a Saturn focus, but you're also quite gullible and naive. How do you manage that? I was talking to a film producer in another country, and he was just laughing. He said, "Yes, I don't know how I manage that myself either. I'm cynical and gullible." So, um, but those are, and then I emphasize that any statement is actually a neutral statement. You could emphasize that too. There's no judgment about that. You recognize those disparate concepts immediately. I think I might have been talking about Saturn for the cynical bit, and maybe Jupiter combined with Neptune or something else. Um, but I'm reading a question now. You can probably tell that. Well, okay, so there's another question here about being all-knowing. Yeah, you are all-knowing. You're just not all-telling. How about that? Well, no, forget about that. No, people are coming to you for an opinion about something. Um, and any other predictive science, there are parameters. You've seen these patterns before. What this means in your experience, this pattern means a certain thing. But no, honestly, just uh, that you don't. One does not have to be all knowing. That's only God can do that, right? Um, but do have confidence in the meanings of the planets, in the classical meanings of the planets. And so then, although this isn't a question, um, I might legitimately say that there are a lot of different influences. Yeah, and when I'm working with the client, I'm saying I let them know what I'm looking at. They've um, they, I send it to them. They say I send it a diagram to, I mean a chart rather. I I call it a diagram for my clients, but it mainly serves to confirm their time of birth. I mean the data that I've calculated their chart for. But I sometimes, I mean in a vague attempt to actually address your question, Vish. Um, I let people know that this is, again, this is my interpretation and based on the Shastras. And I say to people, I make this look easy when after we've gotten into the session a bit. I make this look easy, but it is not. I am interpreting a symbolic language, and your job, client, is to figure out the personal application in your life. So there, I put it. I do put it back on my client, saying, if you don't see much English in what I've sent to you, this is a really elaborate, ancient, antique, valuable symbol system, which has not been improved for the last 4 or 5,000 years because it doesn't need improvement. These archetypes still exist. Your job is to keep an open mind and see how this relates specifically. So so that's what I want to say about that. Now, I also don't mind if somebody sent in a question about their own birth chart. I usually do not like that when I'm speaking in public, but if someone wants that to do that, I'm fine for that. As I said, I'm at your service. But until that happens, I want to continue, if I may, to offer some information about current transits. So again, here we are in mid-October, and so again, and my intention is to make your life easier as a consultant, or even as watching your own charts or the charts of your loved ones. And so there's plenty to work with these days, she says so optimistically. By that I mean, all right, so you know that Rahu Ketu just entered one of their good places, one of their happy places. This is the type of language I actually use with my clients. Oh, Rahu Ketu, they've entered their happy places, a happy place for them. They could be operating really well in your your second house or your eighth house. Look for opportunities for investment, or intentionally develop a different relationship with money. Put some thought on defining your current value system. So I think concepts like the word value system, when in this case I'm talking about Rahu Ketu in the financial signs, that's sort of again, it puts it back on the client. For I say, or I offer, all right, Rahu Ketu just moved into Scorpio and Taurus, so you may find. Thank you. My phone has just offered that it's the Venus hora now, and I do note those kinds of intrusions, those nimittas in a session. So it's the Venus hora. I just use the word value. That I think is a contemporary concept to use for Venus. Yes, Venus is the planet of love, and it's also the planet of what you value. So I think that it might be a useful concept too to add that these sessions are interactive in a certain way about their dasha. I don't have any, if nobody sends me an agenda in advance, or if nobody has questions, typically my clients do not have questions. They because they've all been referred to me and they know my style. They come up to see, they come to me to see, whatever I have to say about their situation. But I do make it interactive in that way. I say, you may want to, this is a chance for you in the next 18 months to really redefine or update or upgrade your value system in a specific way. Then I just would drop that and would leave that alone and say, and go through my checklist of where the planets are. Okay, everybody knows that, excuse me, that Jupiter is in Sagittarius until the third week in November of 2020. Yay! That's what I say to my clients, so they know in advance it's going to be good news. So wherever Jupiter is transiting in a client's chart, I would advise them to take a calculated risk there. Take a calculated risk. That is the exact terminology I use. And that usually resonates. It's pretty straightforward to take a calculated risk for obvious reasons. But I also say that, so my definition of the effect of Jupiter is that, all right, it's in its own sign of Sagittarius, or it's in its happy place. I just keep it simple. It operates, it functions very well where it is. So I would say, I wouldn't advise, but I would offer a person, if Jupiter's in your first house, Jupiter's in your first house, and your all important first house until around Thanksgiving. This is a time for real self-expression. Damn the torpedoes. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks about you. There's a lot of self-knowledge and self-understanding and self-acceptance associated with this particular influence. How to make the most of that. That's another phrase I use a lot. You, dear client, figure out how you can make the most of this, how you can leverage this. And it puts the onus on the person that's receiving the information on what they can do for themselves. So this is also a very important point. Thank you for letting me offer this as well. It's a very important point that, again, there's a question here. There's an expectation of being all-knowing. Well, that's kind of an old-fashioned model, I think, really. And I think the current model now is to be more aware of how to interact with the existing under these existing conditions. So that sort of addresses being all-knowing. Well, Jupiter's in your first house for the next 4 weeks. I could say that you have plenty of opportunities for self-expression, for self-actualization, for understanding yourself, or understanding how you appear to other people. You have opportunities to showcase yourself. That would be an actual term that I would use. Are you going to do that or not? I mean, that's up to that person. I can easily identify opportunities for that which have not been there for the last 12 years. That's another thing that is important, is to put these planetary influences in context. Put them in context. That's immediately recognizable. A client would find that immediately recognizable. For instance, if I said, "Oh, goody gumdrops, Jupiter is moving through your first house," which is a good thing. It hasn't been there for 12 years. They immediately start calculating, "Oh, 12 years ago, what happened?" And then I reel them back in and say, "Well, of course you can't step into the same river twice, but there could be a variation on a similar theme. What happened 12 years ago when you took a calculated risk? It doesn't define whether you will take a calculated risk or whether you won't, but here's the opportunity for that." Now, additionally, so just using this one very simple example, transiting Jupiter in the first house. If I see that a person is, oh, I don't know, if for whatever reason they have some sort of complex where they are very conservative or risk averse or very Saturnine, then I would bring that up again. I would bring up that quality. I would say, "Oh, dear client, I see you have a Sun conjunct Saturn in the 6th house, and your life experience has been that you're more comfortable if you just keep your head down and do your job, and might be happy enough to be in the background. However, dear client, these are specific conditions where if you could stretch yourself a bit, I think you'd get a reward." It's pretty straightforward. Now, some of you in attendance might say, "Charlotte, that's pretty elementary." Well, that's my actual point. Those of you have heard me before say, keep it simple. If you're going to be seeing people all day long, which you will, and because you will be helping people and people will refer other people to you because you do help them, then do keep it simple. You could, if you're tested, if you're required to say, "Why did you say that?" then you can just reel that off to a person. You can give them all the arcane metrics of how this works. Your clients will not ask you that. I mean, if they do, you can answer it, but they won't ask that. They don't care. They just want to know what to take advantage of. So I would say to a person with Jupiter transiting Sagittarius in their first house, I'd say, "You're operating from a position of strength. Go for it," or something along those lines. No matter what their natal condition is. And so now I can also hear somebody saying, "But is that irresponsible? Because what if Jupiter also is the Lord of their 8th house?" Well, that would be impossible to have Jupiter, the Lord of the 8th house, if you're Sagittarius rising. However, if there's some kind of strange placement or weird dasha period, something like that, of course you're going to say there could, with this caveat that all right, Jupiter's the Lord of your 8th house, then be careful. Watch your money. Don't be, watch your expenses. Something quaint I say is, keep your third eye open. Not keep your eyes open, keep your third eye open. And I say that very seriously, but I have to keep myself entertained as well. So yes, there's always things to offset. And that's another good point. The other day I had a client and he said, "Charlotte, all this sounds so good. What's the downside?" So then he gave me permission to go in that direction. I said, "Well, let's talk about your mother." "Really? My mother?" He did not want to talk about that. But, if somebody gives you permission to say, "What's the downside?" then, you listen for those cues, don't you? I mean, not that having the moon conjunct Pluto or Saturn in the 8th house is a downside, but there should be enough interaction between you and your client where they would feel comfortable about asking that. I'm looking in this chat box here to make sure I'm seeing things correctly. I like your questions though. So, new paragraph. This is how I talk to my clients. I can go on, as you can clearly see. This is not a new paragraph. This is a new chapter. So I have there's a question from an Ayurvedic Vaidya here, and I also want to say that as you well know, the planets represent organ systems too, or body parts or organ systems. So that's always something that could be touched on in any kind of consultation. So for instance, on the Jupiter theme, so let's say somebody's born with Jupiter in Capricorn, whether it's in maybe it's in their first house. Yeah, Jupiter's in Capricorn in their first house. So Saturn is transiting over that point. And so I would go on and on about the, what would I say about that? If someone, anybody under any circumstances that had transiting Saturn crossing over Jupiter, I would say that you know your belief system, your life philosophy, your operating assumptions are under close scrutiny. Look at this. You might want to you might want to update your belief system or your vision statement, or some. We can talk in psychological terms about that as well, and that. If my experience with my clients is that really resonates. Again, using the example of transiting Saturn on somebody's Saturn, first of all, I would say just for context, this has not happened for about 30 years, so it's rare. It's rare and impactful. How can you make the most out of this situation, which might not be that much fun for a certain length of time? Well, you manage the effect by taking action. You manage the effect by taking action. The action that one could legitimately take with transiting Saturn on Jupiter would be to eliminate any belief systems which do not serve them at this state of their maturity. That's another good point to make about transits, is to say that now you're no longer young. Dear Mr. or Mrs. or Miss Client, now that you're a mature person, you could have a better functioning worldview now that Saturn is crossing over your Jupiter, in terms of looking at any operating paradigms which do not serve you. And then we could talk about the specifics. Jupiter is the Lord of the 12th house and the third house. We would talk about that too. But I would also say to that person, I would preface this by saying, I'm not giving you medical advice. Which always makes me laugh because I have a lot of medical professionals as clients. I say, I'm not giving you medical advice, but you might want to make sure that your liver is functioning well. Make sure you're getting enough of the bitter taste in your diet. The liver loves it. Jupiter is the planet of the liver and associated organ systems, anything under your right rib cage. And so make sure that's functioning. Maybe you get your liver enzymes checked or something like that. And I immediately say that this is not saying that you have a real problem with your liver. This says put attention on its proper functioning. And depending on what sign Jupiter is in, it would also represent the hips. So, if a client is of a certain age, I would say, guard your hips. It's pretty straightforward. But, all of these transits they're multivalent. They operate on several different systems simultaneously. So it's easy enough to go through a pretty standardized checklist of transits for people. Of course, we were just talking about, we being me, was just talking about hang on. We're just talking, Charlotte, I'm talking on your behalf about Jupiter in its own sign of Sagittarius for the next 4 weeks. Everybody gets the same advice. All the clients get the same advice. Here's the next 4 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever it is, 6 weeks. Hit it hard. Take advantage. Expand yourself past your current boundaries in this particular arena, with the stated intent, with whatever your stated intent is as well. But these astrology consultations they are co-active. I'm offering information, and what are you going to do with that, dear client? I would say the sun is shining, go out and do your laps in the pool. Or I can see that it will be raining for 6 weeks. Hunker down and clean the garage, or whatever is appropriate. I think you know what I'm referring to. But back to my generic, or so-called generic checklist of planets. So we all know that Saturn is in Capricorn for until what? Third week in January 2023. Now I can hear some smart person in my audience saying, but Charlotte, it retrogrades back into, that I don't offer that to my clients. They don't care the specifics. They want to know the general time frame. Okay, Saturn rather will be in Capricorn for this time in general. The general theme says that this will be some hard work, due diligence, patience, application, doing something you've been procrastinating about in whatever house it is, whatever house Saturn is spending time in. And again, I go back to making the point that this is just information. This is just information. It's all neutral. Wherever Saturn is, or wherever Rahu Ketu are, or wherever Mars is, it simply says, watch yourself in this area. It's neither bad nor good. I mean, on the other hand, do whatever you like, but you're paying me your good money to say that, oh, I see that Saturn is now transiting through your 6th house of good health and ill health. So, client, no matter what your age, even if you are a young person, this says Saturn is suggesting that you apply more due diligence to what? Proper nutrition, rest, activity, exercise, all the boring things. Sometimes I say to a client, and then after Saturn gets out of your 6th house, then you can slack off again. I mean, they find that an amusing idea, but the information is presented as completely neutral. I mean, now this, I don't know if you would read about that approach in the ancient Shastras. Again, I'm simply offering this information to you as an experienced practitioner of Jyotish. And as I keep saying, I'm not a scholar, although I am the president of the American College of Vedic Astrology. Thank you very much. There are scholars on faculty and on our leadership team. I am not one of those. I am just in the trenches. I'm the membrane between the scholarship of Jyotish and the personal application for individual clients. So that's what I'm intending to offer you, is that I don't know, maybe it's a little more lighthearted than people think it is. I mean, than we as Jyotishis might believe that it is. And by that I mean that people make their own decisions. If I say, oh, I see it's going to be raining for 6 weeks, hey, they can go outside with an umbrella or without an umbrella or not at all. And that's where, the concept of free will comes in. Free will. That could be a whole other conversation, but well, we could talk about that now as a practical matter, since nobody's sending me any more questions. But I'll fill in the gaps on the existing questions here. So free will. Now, the 3rd house is very important, isn't it? So this is something that I keep in the back of my mind when I'm, talking about any given thing for a client. If they have some powerful planets in their 3rd house, or if their 3rd house lord is powerful or well positioned by whatever measurement technique, that even, okay, so just to back up, I'm assuming, maybe incorrectly, that everybody knows that the 3rd house is the house of moral courage. Now, in the West, where I practice contemporary Jyotish, we have more choices than people in maybe in South Asia currently, in any case. So I think, you know, Westerners perhaps have more choices, and the looking at a person's third house of moral courage, that's my designation, or just energy to get things done in life. Energy to get things done in life, even if there is some kind of hairy or difficult transit coming up. I can clearly see that a person that has, you know, big planets in the third house is just going to power through anyway, based on their will, based on their free will, and their, I mean, quite frankly, their bravery. So that's one of those that's one of those I don't know, more amorphous qualities to look at the third house of the condition of a client's third house, that they can, you know, they can just roll up their sleeves and do virtually anything. So, I mean, even under planetary conditions. So I do make that point to my clients too, to, you know, the planets are not our puppet masters. And the more consciousness we have about them, and the more we do our spiritual work, the more we're intending to cooperate with the planets, right? No matter what the situation, whether they're supportive, you know, ride that wave as long as you can. And if they're depressive, well, then you just my famous advice, my classic advice is, don't make it any worse than it already is. Saturn's on your moon. What's going to be there for a certain length of time? Here's one of my favorite concepts that I tell my clients. I said, it's perfectly natural for you to be going through this hardship at this time. This is the perfect time for you to have to close down your family home and put your mother in assisted living. This is the perfect time for this to happen. And I said it in the most loving way. And it actually, I mean, you might go, well, that's obvious. Well, it's obvious to you now. But I would say that if you could actually add that sort of concept with your clients, is the perfect time for you to be feeling miserable. I wouldn't say that, but I would say it's the perfect time for this to happen. Saturn is crossing over, whatever, or Mars, or anything like that. So I'm reading a question now. Can you share how you interpret retrogrades? It seems different. Retrogrades. Oh yes, I have actually had that on my list too of things to discuss. Thank you for that question. Thank you, sir. So we all currently know here in mid-October that Mars is retrograde in Pisces. So again, adhering to the general principle that less is more. I would, you know, depending on the amount of time I had with a client, I would touch on this. I would say, oh, well, this is interesting. This is an unusual situation or condition. Mars is retrograde in your whichever house, first house. Let's go. Mars is retrograde in your first house. Then first of all, I say that Mars, most of my clients have heard of I mean, almost anybody that comes to an astrologer has heard of the phenomenon of retrograde Mercury. So you have probably heard about retrograde Mercury. I emphasize this is not bad. It is just different. So simply recognizing the fact that, oh, Mars is retrograde in your first house until November 12th. So scale back your expectations. Just don't pile on yourself. Don't necessarily expect to feel that you can power through something. You do not have to. You're running a, I don't know, what would we say, something along the lines of this is a marathon and not a sprint. Pace yourself. Pace yourself. In the case of Mars retrograde, and wherever it is, it says that, you know, the concept of I think the most useful concept is more like detachment and observation. And again, I refer to the fact that, you know, our clients are educated, sophisticated people. If they can pay to consult a Jyotishi, There's a good reason that they're doing that. They're intending to access valuable information because they are sophisticated and because they are educated. So if again, if we look at retrogrades more on the sense of the psychological qualities that would be inherent with that experience, the well, first of all, I have to reassure my clients, this is not bad, it's just different. How is it different? Well, you will observe this in yourself. My job, as I see it, is to identify a condition. Mars is retrograde in any given area. So the tradition, yes, I know that traditionally this is not a good thing. Well, okay, how is that useful? If something is either good or bad. So for instance, if someone were going to begin something with Mars retrograde, well, I mean, in terms of a Mahurt or some specific application like that, we would make sure that, moving things around technically to make sure that the Mars is not the lord of some important house and it's retrograde. I'm not sure that that's what the question is about. But in terms of retrogrades in general, I say this is just different. So for instance, the issue, that's the word I use. I was almost said the problem. The problem with retrograde planets is at the point where they are stationary retrograde. And that is typically for a very short period of time. At the most, it's associated with a delay or a pause. Now, just that information for a client is useful. So, for instance, not that long ago, when Mars was stationary retrograde and backing over a Gandanta point. Now, that's easily identifiable. We would all know that looking at the planetary placements when Mars was retrograding in the first 48 minutes of Aries and the last 48 minutes of Pisces. There's no doubt about it. That 2 or 3 day period is just, it says all bets are off, lay low, be very mindful. Now that word mindful, when I hear it, I go, God, that's a cliche, but it's useful. Just watch and wait, reduce your expectations. Don't expect something that you're not going to get at that period. But then when Mars is picking up speed, even though it's retrograde, the problem with retrogrades is the speed at which a planet moves, not the direction in which it moves. That's my assertion. That's my findings. That's my experience, rather. So for instance, you could just check your own charts. Right now, Mars is retrograde. What happened? Something bad? I don't think so. It's just a slightly different approach. And the thing too, the general concept of retrogrades is that you're allowed to take a break. Now, somebody that's Aries rising or Scorpio rising, yes, for them, because Mars is their chart lord, and they're typically Mars-ruled people are used to going straight ahead in the shortest distance between 2 points, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. It's actually a very useful concept to tell your clients, listen, I understand that this is your normal style is, again, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. However, Mars is retrograde. There's no shame in taking a nap. I actually use that terminology, but and again, this occurs naturally in nature. Obviously, the planets are retrograde. Take a break. That's what I think that retrogrades mean. In any retrograde planet. Now the planets beyond Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and let's just say Jupiter and Saturn. When they're retrograde, does that, unless they're your chart lord or in a Mahurt or some other specific technical reason, they're retrograde so much of the time, it's not that big of a deal. I say that with all due respect. Okay, here's a question. Are you, this is so odd to just be talking to my screen. I was going to say, are you okay with what we've just done here? I'm going to assume that you're okay, and I'll keep going and addressing this question here. So, excuse me, there's a question about what's my response for people who don't know the difference between tropical and sidereal astrology? Yes, and that's a constant question. So I tell people that just keeping it simple, because unless you're debating a Western astrologer, nobody cares about this. However, it's good to know. So what I say to my clients when they've come to me as an astrologer, they don't know Western astrology, Vedic astrology, they don't know it's just astrology, is I say that they say, what? Wait a minute, I'm a Cancer? I'm a Leo. Yes, you really want to be a Leo. Everybody wants to have their sun in Leo. We don't even talk about your sun sign. Your sun stays in a sign for a month. Who cares about your sun sign? I actually use that terminology. But since you asked, here's how we measure the position of the planets against the actual backdrop of the constellations. The backdrop of the constellations. What you may be familiar with in Western pop astrology is symbolic. We are talking in this particular instance about, yes, you were born you're born in early August. So according to pop astrology, your sun is in the symbolic sign of Leo. However, it is not. It is actually against the backdrop of the cluster of the stars in Cancer, the crab. If you asked any scientist or an astronomer, where is the sun positioned on the 6th of August of any year, that scientist would tell you that it's against the backdrop of the stars of Cancer, the crab. But we don't really care about what your sun sign is. I know I just said that, but I also make the point that, I mean, that could be a simple enough explanation. That could be a simple enough explanation. But I also add, because this is it's very simple. I said, earlier in the year, we had a February 29th. There's every 4 years, there's a leap day to make sure that the calendars keep up with themselves. This is what Vedic astrology does as well. We adjust every year for a little slippage. And usually when I go on like that for 2 minutes, they go, okay, that's very interesting. What's going to happen with me? But I reference the actual constellations, the star patterns, and which anybody can see on their own phone. If you pick up your phone and you've got an app on the stargazing app, you can clearly see that Sagittarius is in the it's rather Jupiter's against the backdrop of the constellation of Sagittarius, the Archer, and Capricorn is in the constellation of Capricornus, the sea goat. You can clearly see that for yourself on your own phone. That usually satisfies people. Oh, thanks. So, well, should we just fill in the hour by talking about let's see. I'll have to think on my feet here. What else could we talk about? We could talk about, I think that this could also address a question about, excuse me. There's a new question in here. Usually we have a moderator, and I'm figuring out how to moderate myself. Okay, there's a question about the reverse node return. The reverse node return. Now, here's another consulting technique. I have no problem saying to my client that I do not have an opinion on any given thing. They actually like that. No, I don't know everything. Heck, I'm happy. I'm delighted that I know as much as I do. But here's the question that I'm saying that I don't have an opinion on this is about a reverse node return. I have heard so many different interpretations of this, and none of them make sense to me. And I've obviously observed them in my own chart. What happens? I don't know. Is it too subtle for me? Maybe. I'm thinking that that the questioner is talking about transiting North Node conjunct the South Node in your birth chart. No, I'm sorry, but I think this brings up, I'm sorry I don't have an opinion about that, except to go back to the central meaning of the planets we're going to call Rahu Ketu planets, to say that since those planetary influences since they are not logical and not rational, since the any kind of promptings come from a very deep internal unconscious source in you, that I would suggest to my client to simply keep to be aware to monitor their own mind, to see what's coming out of their own subconscious mind or their superconscious mind, and see how they may perhaps signal I'm staring off into space to find the right word, signal access to impulses from a previous lifetime, since that's what the nodes can also represent. That's why the nodes, Rahu Ketu, North Node of the Moon, South Node of the Moon, Rahu Ketu, since they also represent vestiges of a previous existence, or they can. Which previous existence? This current previous existence, yes, there can be deeply imprinted samskaras, residue. I just use the word residue. So my clients, if they don't know what samskaras mean, residue from a previous lifetime. It can be unconscious. It's not illogical, but it's not logical. It's not irrational, but it can be not rational. And then again, using that, the premise that I'm not dodging the question by putting it back on them, but I would say that, this is an obscure topic. The influence of Rahu Ketu are by nature obscure, and it takes some observation on your own part. But the value of looking at this would be to define the specific parameters where this effect is in play. So for Rahu Ketu, give that maybe I don't know, a week, 10 days or something like that. You have to define the time for what you're looking at, or else you'll confuse yourself. So let's say the nodes also move at different speeds, those little rascals. So, but you would define for yourself, observe this, and see, are you having an out-of-body experience? Are you having an otherworldly experience? Are you taking plant-based medicine? I would not advise that. But are you having disturbing dreams? Then, of course, you could, period, new paragraph. You could also say, well, whatever house this is, there could be some sort of resolution in the house in which this is taking place, in which this is playing out. Now, that word resolution, I would also highly advise you to put that in your vocabulary for dealing with people. I mean, working with clients. I don't mean dealing with people. That sounds a little harsh, but it's a broad-based idea. I mean, it's a broad-based concept, but I think it's really valuable. Saturn is really good for resolution too. But I would say to my client, do you intend to look backwards at your own unconscious influences in this arena, physical health, relationships, your career, finances, resources, wherever houses they fall in. I think that I think that that is something that, although the classic effect of Rahu Ketu is to have a sudden, in the case of Rahu, a sudden up spike in attention, energy, and events associated with that. Again, just more action. And then the corresponding cluelessness or detachment or rejection associated with Ketu crossing over some point. So these planets, they don't neutralize each other, but it could bring some resolution for in terms of understanding unconscious compulsions. That is actually exactly what I mean to say about that. I know I started off saying that I didn't have an opinion on that, but as I said, I'm here to serve you. Oh, yes. So here's a question. Thank you. That about the aspects from Rahu Ketu. Yes, Rahu Ketu throw trines in both directions. So thank you for that question. Yes, they're not. They're not technically planets, but they're grahas. And I think that although I have scholarly debates with my colleagues about the necessity of using the Sanskrit terms for astrological conditions, this is the case where we would actually use the concept of grahas. The sun and the moon are not planets. We consider them planets. Rahu Ketu are not planets, but in English we consider them to be planets for our purposes here. But the concept of grahas, they have power, they have they influence, and yes, the because again, going back to my premise that less is more. Yes, I do believe that the trines or triangular or 120 degree or 5th house, 9th house aspects from Rahu Ketu are really powerful for a short period of time. That's also an important function or idea for a period of time. Any planet will be can be throwing trines. No, any planet has only a certain length of time. I think it's very useful for clients to understand those kind of parameters. I mean, it is our job to be the masters or the mistresses of time. Okay, do you have a K2 is aspecting your Jupiter for this period of time? You, client, put this on your calendar to take advantage of this between this date and 10 days after that. There has to be a beginning date and an ending date, or else it's going to be pretty confusing in actual practice. But yes, I do make the point to my Western astrology colleagues from the past that there are 3 planets that throw trines: Jupiter and Rahu and Ketu. Now, I can also hear somebody thinking, yes, but the ancient Shastras say that other planets can throw trines. Listen, don't confuse yourself. Less is more. So, any other questions? This is the point where Ramdas Bill Sinclair would think of something interesting to say. Let me see if I've missed a question. Oh, yeah, I did miss a question here. And this is a good one, too. Oh, there's lots of them here. Gosh. Hang on. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Let's see. Mercury stationary on election day. Well, we already know what that's going to be like because we saw that in 2020, didn't we? I mean, in the year 2000, with the question on the table is, could you talk about Mercury stationary on election day? Well, yeah, so that's not, I'm certainly not going to predict the outcome. I think a lot of us are hoping for a specific outcome. But again, the idea will just be a delayed a delayed decision, I guess, or it's yes, it'll just be delayed. Look back to 2020. I mean to 2000 rather. Excuse me for making the same mistake twice. To 2000, delayed results. That's it. Are you okay with that? If not, then question me. Okay, so here is well, all right. Here is another very good question about do I discuss the nakshatras of the planets and the padas? No, I do not, because again, my, oh, yes, I do mention yes, I do mention their their, their lunar nakshatra. Um, but very briefly, here's what I've been doing lately, simply because I can only see a certain amount of people in a day. I mean, I could see four people a day, 7 days a week for an ever. I mean, I could exhaust myself, but I have a certain length of time that I can speak with any given person, any given person. So on an initial, excuse me for continuing to scratch my forehead, but if clients coming to me for the first time, yes, I discuss their lunar nakshatra in in elemental ways, because again, my intention is to not baffle them. They've just met me, and now all of a sudden we're going to be talking about the deities of their nakshatras, or so I actually I give them just the basics of any nakshatra. So their moon is in Pusha. So first of all, the way I would say that is, okay, your moon is in Cancer, so you have a very high maternal or domestic component. You're the domestic god or goddess. And I had a recent client had the moon in Pusha, and so I said, this is a very good, this is a very nice nakshatra. You should be proud of yourself. You're Mr. Mom, right? You're Mr. Mom, right? And he was just so delighted to hear that. And I said, you cook and bake and do everything. He was just delighted to hear that. I mean, he was a big businessman, but he loved that component as well. Mr. Mom. Now, again, that probably doesn't sound very scholarly, but we can talk in those terms if necessary. But again, conveying the basic idea to a person that it's okay to be Mr. Mom. I mean, just using the most elementary ideas. And I'm sure you can come up with something much more sophisticated. But again, I just have to use my own language here. But I would say but within the 30-degree sector of Cancer, there's a specialized area, a little 13-degree and 20-minute area called Pusha, where your moon is. You, Mr. Client, can look that up online. Pusha is spelled Pushya, and you can get further elaboration on that. You'll be proud of yourself. You'll find out that Pusha is one of the best places to have your moon. I would not say Pusha is known for being the best sign, the best nakshatra, except for marriage. I happen to know that man was married because his wife referred him. So this brings up another point. There are certain things that you do not say. Like that was a good example. You don't have to tell your clients everything. First of all, there's not enough time to tell your clients everything. It takes a good hour to go through a padas. I never, ever talk about padas. I don't think I've ever used that I've been practicing Jyotish for almost 25 years. Never once mentioned that. But again, I mean, that's something you would know about your individual chart. And you could read Komila Sutton's excellent book on the nakshatras. That is, she discusses padas in detail. But again, I'm talking to somebody for 60 minutes or 90 minutes. That's it. And I just touch on nakshatras. And then later on when they can go, and I do warn people, I say, there's a lot of rubbish online, but in the interest of being comprehensive in our survey here on your chart today, I'm leaving it up to you to do your homework. And I find that, I mean, and you will find too, that your clients like having homework. I say, here's how you spell Pusha, Pushya. Go online, see, but and here's your other homework. When people get off a session, a call with me, they've got at least a half a dozen post-call homework assignments, which I don't have time for. But again, our job is to identify certain conditions, give the basic idea of what the meaning is, give some pointers on how to manage this, how to manage something that's difficult. And I mean, that is also, I mean, that's a legitimate function of a Jyotishi. Hang on, I'm reading again. La, la, la. Oh, another question. No. Oh, that's a great question too. God, you guys are good. Uh, I have another question. While analyzing a chart, should we consider the Vedic chart as well as the Western chart? Well, yes. Or should we consider analyzing only the Western chart if the person is born in the West of the world? Or only analyze the Vedic chart if the person is born in the East? That's a beautiful question. No, let's go straight to Jyotish. I cannot be more emphatic about that. Because Western astrology is not measuring the planets in the actual positions in the sky. The house rulerships are going to be all messed up if you look at the Western chart. Now, if the question could also be interpreted, would we use Western concepts for Western-born people? Yeah, but I use Western concepts. I have a lot of clients from South Asia too, and I mean, being who I am, I mean, this is my understanding of the world. My understanding of the world is that one does have choices. One does have choices. It maybe more, some people maybe more than other people, but no, the Western chart, just don't do that at all. There's no need for that. Yes, use the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Those are no longer exclusive to Western astrology. But no, don't use the Western chart at all. That's yes, there's things to be, the planets will be in aspect to each other in both systems, but house rulerships will be off. Therefore, everything will be off. I mean, in 75% of the cases, house rulerships will be off. But again, in my world, that doesn't come up for discussion much anymore. Anymore. People say, well, what about my regular astrology? Are you talking about Western symbolic astrology? We could do that, but we're not going to do that because the predictions will be because the house rulerships will be inaccurate in 75% of the time. The areas of your life that we're looking at that need attention or exploitation or whatever it is, it will be different. Yes, if Mars is throwing its 4th house aspect onto Saturn, and Saturn is simultaneously throwing its 10th house aspect on Mars, that is going to translate across platforms, and that is something that you would look at. But I don't think I really don't think anymore that it's such a big deal or necessary, necessary to talk so much about the differences between Vedic astrology and Western astrology. People, I'm assuming that since you're trained in Jyotish and you have your credentials in Jyotish, so here's what I have talking Jyotish. So I didn't mean to be so vociferously against Western astrology. I'm not against Western astrology. It's just not accurate. There. Please don't throw me under the bus and tell all my Western astrologer friends I said that. I say that to them. I say that to them personally, but I think that it's in order, again, going back to the concept of serving our clients, that that also giving letting people have options on how they receive the information. People, again, I make the assertion that our clients are going to be, if they're smart enough to even want the services of a Jyotishi, they're probably educated enough to understand the concept that they can use their free will, tap into the timing, leverage the influence of the benefics, minimize the influence of the malefics, and use their own choices to manage this. I think that, again, this brings up in the back of my mind the concept of fate and free will and destiny and karma and all these other elaborate ideas, which are brilliant and beautiful and useful and accurate and true. Yes, these are true. There are a certain amount of certain amount of fate, destiny, free, and karma, which will have to be acted upon, excuse me, at certain stages of life. And we can clearly see what those are, and then you just have to remediate that, or palliative care, or whatever is necessary to just simply get through that. The concept of getting through these times is, again, I so delicately say, don't make it any worse than it already is by complaining about it. Acceptance while you are working and doing everything you can to mitigate the influences. This too shall pass. It's very comforting to people to know, even if it's a 2.5-year period of whatever it is, then just knowing that here's an end date. Keep your eyes on the prize. This is the kind of, it's not casual terminology, it's just Western terminology that the people can immediately get. And and I also, again, if you've heard this before, please forgive me, it bears repeating though, that I tell people when I show them a picture of their chart, I say, these are your default settings. That's immediately understandable. Okay, see all these planets here? These are your default settings. These default settings can be changed through application, spiritual practice, due diligence, choices. That's a very, I think that's a very useful concept right out of the bat. This is what I tell people when I'm, showing them here's your birth chart. You see this thing here? This is what this means. This is where I'm getting this information. However, these are your default settings. You can change them. You can see that I use a South Indian chart. Less is more. I've made some notes on it. Thank you. Now my phone is giving me the mantra for Mercury, coincidentally. Okay, so here's a question too about how does the Navamsha chart influence my reading? I look at that before I talk to a client. Obviously, I actually don't spend much time preparing. If you've seen it, tens of thousands of these charts, you can get a pretty quick glimpse. But along those lines, I actually think I'm reading this guy's chart. And this particular chart, here's the Navamsha. I have simply circled, okay, this Navamsha has Saturn in Aries. I put a circle around that. Venus in Taurus, the Sun in Leo, and the Moon in Scorpio. So depending on the age of my client, I consider that, how much do I consider that? Maybe 2% of any given information that I'm considering. The Navamsha is 2%. It will either generally support what I'm saying or complicate matters. Like, so this person has debilitated Saturn and debilitated Moon and a good Venus and a good Sun and exalted Jupiter. Actually, there's so much information in this person's Navamsha that I would probably not consider that much at all. Now, I realize that, again, I'm the president of a prestigious online Jyotish college, and I'm saying, yes, you please do consider the Navamsha in your own chart and be proud of what you have there. Be proud of your exalted Jupiter in your Navamsha. You already know that. The Navamsha really kicks into, I believe that the Navamsha begins to become an operational influence after Ketu matures at age 48. Now that's an original idea on my part, but about the maturity of the planets. I'm a big fan of the maturity of the planets. That's just a simple concept, very simple concept you can use. Any given planet, I forgot what they are now, I'll be honest with you. I have no problem saying I've forgotten about the age of the maturity of planets, but I had a client very recently. I think Saturn matures at age 36, and that was his. Saturn was this man's chart, the 10th house lord, and he said a major moment of professional accomplishment and prestige for the major point of your life up to that point, or it was a little more coherent than that. But the point was that that was a major milestone in this man's life, in his professional life. And he said, "Oh yes, I became the president of this thing at this year." And people are just delighted to hear how consonant they are with their own planets, just with a simple statement like that. Oh yeah, Saturn's your 10th house lord, la la la. They're age 36. But back to the Navamsha. I think that since Ketu, out of every planet, one finally has all their planets acting in a mature manner or a manageable manner, as is to be hoped, after age 48, because that's the last date that any given planet matures, that being Ketu. And that's when I think that the Navamsha really also begins to show whatever it's going to contribute. But here's one more question. It's about Sati Sati in the 12th, first and second houses. My question is, out of these houses, only the 12th house is a Distan. Then why is it a problem when Saturn is in the first house and the second house? Well, wait, Sati Sati. Well, you're talking about, dear, are you talking about Sati Sati from the moon or from the ascendant? Now, the Sati Sati can also, hey, I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. If I'm going to be labeled a heretic, I might as well just go out in a blaze of glory. So I have to say that Sati Sati, people that are currently in Sati Sati, their moon is in probably Capricorn, where the Saturn ruled sign. It's not so bad. It just means more duty, obligations. It's an arduous time. I mean, I don't emphasize that with my clients. I have to tell you another thing. Even if I saw a client in Sati Sati, I would not mention anything about 7 years. They're already having a hard enough time. Now, I would figure out how to incorporate the fact that they are in Sati Sati throughout in the conversation, somewhere else. But my experience of dealing with clients is I do a lot of damage control. Somebody comes to me saying, somebody said I was going to be all messed up for 7 years. That's not a helpful idea. Yes, one would need to be conservative and due diligent. No, you might not want to move around. I mean, if it's age appropriate for you to downsize and to contract your household, yes, that would be a reasonable thing to do under Sati Sati. But to say that, but I would say to a person, stay the course. Don't change horses in midstream. If you're okay, if you can tolerate what you're doing now, then hang in there for better times. I hope that doesn't sound too. I don't know. I don't know how that sounds to you, but as a practical matter, my clients are perfectly fine with that. And we'll go off onto another subject, and I will I'll carve back. I'm keeping that in my own mind in terms of actionable information going forward. I'm not saying, I might say to somebody, if they really insist upon this, if they already know that they're in Sati Sati, if a client comes to me knowing that they're already in Sati Sati, then I'll address their concerns about that. And they already know that nobody said this was going to be fun. I would say something like, this might be 40 miles of bad road. That's a Western American expression. 40 miles of rough road. Okay, it's 40 miles of rough road. How many miles in? Well, you're probably about, maybe you're 15 miles into the rough road. So pace yourself, or if you're, you're at mile 35 of 40 miles of rough road. You can hang in there for a bit longer. Those are not sloppy concepts. Those are actually understandable concepts, at least for my clients. Again, if somebody else if they bring that up, then yes. But that's another. That comes back to another counseling. Just I mean this generic. If the client wants to talk about this, we'll talk about that thoroughly until they're satisfied about any given topic. But I think that, again, in my experience, they want me to go through the checklist. Okay, here's where this planet, here's your, here's your Mahadasha sequence. That's the broad picture. Here's where the slow moving planets are in this area. This is a 2.5 year cycle, or longer than that, or whatever it is. And it essentially turns out to be, filling in calendar dates for them about what they could do here. Then for you, dear client, there's, to not, to be where you could be exposed or vulnerable. So watch yourself. Then I reassure them. So, but Saturn, this question is about Saturn in the first house. Nobody ever said that Saturn in the first house was anything vaguely resembling fun. But I don't think, I mean, the questioner is combining the idea of sati sati, and I think it must be, the reference must be to the lagna. But yeah, that's a period of obscurity. It's gone through your 12th house, which says that it is to be hoped that you have developed yourself spiritually enough to deal with receiving constructive criticism from the universe. And that is exactly how I characterize Saturn. It's really neither good nor bad. It's not easy or fun or simple, but you're getting constructive criticism from the universe. And so when Saturn's in a person's first house, it says that you're called upon yourself to define your weak points and polish yourself in the way that you know you're supposed to. And this says that you're supposed to do what you know you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, and don't do what you know you're not supposed to do. It's not life affirming anymore. That is the simple message of Saturn. Of course, if you happen to be Capricorn rising and Saturn's in your first house, that puts a completely different spin on it. It says, in a certain way, for the first time in 30 years, you can actually be expressing your true self. There's, variations depending on the rising sign. That's why one doesn't never use Western astrology. You have to use the constellations to define your rising sign. If you're Capricorn rising, you've got Saturn in its own sign. Yay! For the first time in 30 years, go for it. Your success is defined on exactly you being exactly who you are. I would refine that idea a little bit, because even to me that sounds very sloppy, but that's the basic concept. Oh, here's another question. One last question I'm thinking. Have I ever had a client uncomfortable talking about multiple lifetimes and how they would handle this? Yes, that is a good question, because that is a frequent situation. So, excuse me. So I certainly wouldn't bring up Rahu Ketu until at least we get past the mid part of a session. Even if I'm doing the initial survey of their birth chart, I leave that till later, because I can figure out how open they are to spiritual or esoteric concepts. But in general, I would say that that when I'm discussing Rahu Ketu and the concept of past lifetimes, I would say it's either if you're cool with the idea of past lifetimes, this is what this means in that context. If you're not comfortable with that, then it's somewhere deeply embedded in you from your childhood or pre-conscious times in your own life. It is a powerful force that is not operating on a conscious level. And for Westerners, they're usually they're very okay with that idea of pre-conscious times in this lifetime, or pre-verbal times. And so that's how I handle that. But again, it's an unconscious, irrational, illogical, if you were, influence. It's a powerful influence, but you have to try to be aware of where the influence is coming from. So, so with that, we've run through our 90 minutes, and thank you for your time and attention. And again, it was my intention to be useful. I hope that was the case. So again, for further elaboration, the American College of Vedic Astrology is offering this to you simply because of our stated mission statement to educate people in Jyotish and have you make help you in your own evolution, or help you make a positive influence in the outer world because of this, this beautiful divine science of Jyotish. It's up to us to be able to interpret this, isn't it, in order to add value to other people and to give a more objective assessment of current events. So you know where to find us on www.acvaonline.org for classes. Ramdas Bill Sinclair is offering his monthly webinars on the sun and sun ingresses. Those are brilliant and helpful. And, just chatting about these things, you'll always hear some tidbits of things that you don't find in books. So Ramdas Bill Sinclair is good for that sort of thing. And next week, I think it's next week, we'll be presenting Dr. Suhas Sagar. We'll be talking about the 4 pillars of health. That's a complimentary webinar from an expert in his field. So I'm again sending you off with my best wishes. That's how I end a session with a client. I send you off with my very best wishes. And until we meet again, stay very well. 10 or 12 adjectives. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.